don't put your military spouse's career on hold.
Amen to that. You just tell me.
Start now. And why is that before we get into all the impact and what that means?
So a career takes a lifetime to build. You know this. You can't just overnight walk into the job market and say, okay, I'm making six figures, right? But what happens, military spouses, their career's already at a deficit. So let me tell you some numbers. Female military spouses make up the bulk of all military spouses, right?
Sure.
92%.
Wow. I didn't
And
know it
if
was that
you
high.
are a female military spouse with children, you get hit with a double whammy. So female military spouses earn on average 25% less than their civilian counterparts. And if they're a parent, they get hit with a child penalty.
Why? Why do they earn 25% less?
I wish I knew the answer.
Just because they're a military spouse?
It's the life. Military life is hard. You move every couple of years, you know? And then when you move every couple of years, you got to start your career over. And what happens if you have to start your career over? You're not earning what you could.
Hi, my name is Andrea, and I once worked for a company where the owner asked me to call and personally apologize to a client because my status as a military spouse and veteran made them feel threatened. During this time, my husband was halfway through a 15-month deployment. Needless to say, I did not make that call.
So you're dealing with all the challenges of, just spouse and married life, kid. Everybody has that. Just the general life, that the stress maybe, but now you're dealing with added stress of my spouse is a service member and we're moving a lot, like you just said. Maybe the service member's deployed and we'll go into that.
Let's just talk about House Chapman. I've been married to my husband for 5 years. We've lived in 2 different states and another country. We've lived in 4 homes. We had 2 kids. I started 2 businesses.
Hold on. 4 homes, 2 countries.
Well, no, 2 states.
Or 2 states, I'm sorry. And another country?
Yeah.
In 5 years, did you say?
5 years. And this is not.
There it is.
I'm normal. I'm a normal military spouse. There's nothing special about that story. Everybody moves. 1 in 3 military families moves every year. So if you go out on your street when you live on post on Fort Hood and you look to your left and you look to your right, one of y'all is about to move.
So because of this is one reason maybe a military spouse is not able to set down roots, or they put their own career aspirations on hold because they're dealing with this lifestyle?
Military spouses get hit with an unspoken penalty for supporting their service member. It's not the spouse's fault.
Unspoken penalty.
It's not the service member's fault. It's not the spouse's fault. It's just the life that we live. And this is why nobody's cracked a code on military spouse and underemployment.
Interesting.
If the president of a country let a quarter of the people go jobless, that country would be in a state of crisis. But yet, military spouses are, 1 in 4 of them are unemployed, and we live in this every day.
Wow.
Yeah.
So not just employment, because you said, I have my own company and you're an entrepreneur, and military spouses can and often do make great entrepreneurs. So we're talking, and you tell me, you know this better. You were in the career industry. You say career, and that could be one path. And when I think of career, I think of a big company and a position in a big company, and I'm growing and I'm getting promoted. So that's potentially one path, but there's also this entrepreneur path as well, right? That they could take. And oftentimes do they?
So over half of military spouses report turning to self-employment at some time during their career. And think about it. The lifestyle is so hard. It makes sense to be your own boss, set your own hours. Don't have to worry about if you can get daycare that day. It makes sense.
So we're going to touch on that a lot, but I want to go back to something.
Okay.
The career path. It's got to be damn near impossible then. House Chapman, how could you have held down a career if you're 2 states, another country in 5 years? How could you have done that if you can't work remotely? Is it possible even?
People do.
People do.
There's spouses that work the entire time their service member serves and they never have a blip on the radar.
And they PCS and move? Interesting. Would you say that's the norm?
No.
Those are the top, very motivated. Now let's get into this. Since I wasn't going to ask this now, but we're going to ask it now. Is there then maybe a difference between the rank of the service member? Maybe maturity, age. Does that come into play at all?
So the bulk of our armed forces are made out of young people.
Sure.
Right. And when you look at the military spouse demographic, highly, highly, highly diverse. You have young people that 18, 19 years old, 20 years old. Then you have
That often get married young, right?
That's right. That's right. Then you have the seasoned spouses. And so when you are looking at military spouses from an employment perspective, you've got people all over the radar. You've got entry-level talent, you've got mid-career talent, and you've got senior-level talent. It's an amazing talent pool to pull from if you're looking to hire.
We're going to jump around a little bit.
Okay.
But now we're going to talk about entrepreneurship in a sec, because I have longer questions on that. What about just the psychological effect it might have on the spouse or the service member to be, because yes, you're in the military, but you're still a family, you're still a human. And I talked to one guy, close friend of mine, about a week ago, because I was just getting some feedback on our show, and I specifically asked him, I said, did your spouse kind of have to, I forget my exact words, but I said, did your spouse work when you were in? He said no. They had 2 kids. He was constantly deployed, and she kind of had to give up her career. And I said, is there some kind of impact to her? Does she regret it? He said, hell yes.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me about that impact. It's the family life, the structure, that, and then we'll get into maybe the economic impact of them not taking it so seriously in the beginning, and then waking up 10, 15, 20 years later, and then like, oh, I better start taking this serious now.
Yeah. Military spouses fall behind in their careers because of the life circumstances, and the laws are moving slower than military families are PCSing. And so we've got this horribly unemployed demographic in our country, one of the top unemployed demographics in our country, and there are no protections in place to protect military spouses.
Give me an example of protection.
So
Meaning,
think you can't, when you go to a job interview, they can't ask you what your gender is, if you're married, they can't ask you those certain questions, right? And then to boot, military spouse entrepreneurs aren't really recognized anywhere either. Think woman-owned, minority-owned, veteran-owned. They're not really recognized either. And so that's why when we founded the Chamber, our flagship service offering is a certification to do that.
We're going to talk about that. Back to the personal aspect of what do you see when a military spouse does have something to do in life, does have a goal, maybe outside of the house, outside of the kids? Is there a increase in morale, happiness level?
Military spouses that are contributing and have a purpose directly impact the morale and welfare of the service member. And so if you've got, a military spouse, let's just talk about the average E3 salary, and you live in San Diego. The average E3 salary is $24,000. Can you live on that? It's almost, our society almost dictates that in high cost of living areas, the spouse has to work. And so if you are a service member, you got to keep your head in the game. You can't be worried about, am I going to be able to pay the bills? Is my spouse about to have to go line up at the food pantry to supplement the groceries and feed my kids?
And when you told me that happened, I was actually blown. I mean, that happens. You see E3s on food stamps.
Yeah, they're on food stamps. The commissary tracks those numbers. It's tens of millions of dollars spent per year at the commissary using food stamps.
That was going to be my next super silly question. You can spend food stamps at the commissary. I didn't know that. So you can. And I didn't. So, wow. Because we obviously know the E3 is not making money, and then the spouse is not making money. So they're living on a single, anybody can relate to that, living on a single household income, single family. And you have people in the military on food stamps.
Right. And one of the best things, if you feel this and you want to do something about it, if you're a veteran and you work for an employer that hires veterans, start hiring military spouses. Because when you hire a spouse, you directly impact the financial well-being of the entire military unit, the entire military family, and the service members' morale goes up. And what I really worry about is 10 years from now when that new retirement plan starts to rear its ugly head.
So we're going to get to that. Lastly, on the impact of this, not just the morale of the family, but the economic impact to maybe I'm 23, I'm in my early 20s, and I'm not going to focus on my career now. I'm the military spouse. But 10 years from now, I wake up and I say, all right, let's get this train going. You're 10 years behind the power curve. And that's a pretty big deal.
The longer your service member is in the military, the lower your lifetime earnings become as a military spouse. And so I don't tell anybody what to do with their careers, but if you're a service member, you've got to realize your military spouse's career success, it starts at home And you are your spouse's number one support system. And so if your spouse chooses to stay at home with the kids, that is their choice. If your spouse chooses to be an entrepreneur, that is their choice. If they choose the traditional workforce or freelancing, that is their choice.
So
But you've got to throw your full support behind your spouse.
So you say the full support. That reminds me, it's not just have a career to. If you don't know what you want to do, that's fine. But maybe foster a support system to, hey, let's figure it out together.
It's a conversation.
Don't sit and do nothing.
That's right.
It's a conversation.
That's right.
Because we can't have this conversation
Well,
in 10
and
years. It's going to
you've-
be too late.
As a spouse, I really don't know any dependas. That's a horrible stigma. I don't know any. We're volunteering in the community. We go to college. We don't sit around and do nothing when we are in those periods of unemployment. Military spouses are busy.
Active.
Right. They're raising children, going to college. They're busy. They're not sitting around doing nothing. And I encourage the service member to recognize the spouse can professionally develop while they're not working.
Talk to me about that.
Well, you as a military spouse, there is scholarship programs that give you scholarships to go to school for free, right? Up to certain ranks. And then, there's local organizations within your community to volunteer at, to stay busy. There's no reason not to be doing something. And if you're volunteering, you can go in 1 day a week, 1 day a month. You don't have to overwhelm yourself if you've got a deployed husband and you got 3 kids running around acting crazy. You can do it at your pace.
So I get it. And the way I relate to that is I've never been a military spouse, but when I got out of the military, I didn't know what I wanted to do for many, many years, but I still kept going forward. And there was I still found a support system that helped me. So it kind of relates when you say that about even if you don't know what you want to do, just foster that support and keep working towards something.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the biggest thing is stay up to speed with technology, because if you don't stay up to speed with technology, you'll fall behind in technology, and then your peers coming up behind you will surpass you. And then when you enter the workforce, you're dealing with a lot more competition.
That's why the conversation has to start immediately. And that's, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you can't put your career, your career starts now. It doesn't matter if you're actually working or not.
Career, entrepreneurship, freelancing, the world is a lot different. Freelancing in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s maybe wasn't caught on as much, or there weren't maybe online platforms to connect the freelancer to somebody needing the work. Talk to me about freelancing.
Freelancing is a really good option for spouses, especially because it's usually project-based work, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, find childcare, go into your company from 9 to 5 for the rest of your life, right? It can be a surge of work. You can make a little bit of money, you can take a break between if you need to, or let's pretend a lot of military spouses are freelance writers. You can write whenever you need to write. You don't need to be in an office at a certain time. So it's a really great option.
And with technology like Freelance Vets, they have a platform where people, the freelancers, the military spouse, if they have a skill set, can find jobs, paying jobs where 9 times out of 10 or 10 times out of 10, the geographic location is irrelevant.
That's right. There are very rare circumstances as a freelancer thinking about being a 1099 contract worker where you have to worry about the times you got to go in unless it's a physical job, right? But if you're a writer, if you're doing some kind of digital or IT-based work, you have a lot of flexibility as a freelancer.
But people are still people.
People are still people.
And it's not the norm, as you told me the other day when we were chatting, but there are still probably some military spouses that just don't care. I don't want to, say anything bad, but would you say the most are actively trying and do care and want to do something?
There's so many bad stigmas a military spouse has to face before even getting in the front door of an employer. I'm sure there's probably a very small percentage of military spouses out there that really don't want to do anything. Sure, I'm sure that counts not just for spouses, but for everybody. But what I think is the most important thing to remember here is that military spouses are not just an afterthought. When we think about the military community, and especially in my world, in the hiring world, military spouses get rolled up into the same hot dog as a veteran. And a veteran hiring program, newsflash, doesn't work on a military spouse because a veteran and a military spouse have vastly different career needs.
Right.
Right? And so an employer realizes the value of a veteran. They may not realize the value of a military spouse because they think of a military spouse as the same thing as a veteran, and you can't compare an apple to an orange. So you have to design a different hiring program for spouse than a military veteran.
That's true.